Seen how to live your life advice, follow me, the ones that have the biggest social media followings, the ones that in many cases talk about being honest and transparent, are the biggest gaslighting, bullshit, narcissistic people on the planet. And these are the ones that the world follows and takes advice from. It's a very interesting thing.
It's interesting and it's dangerous. I have a fair number of clients in my practice who are deprogramming from cults. But the reason they chose to work with me was being in a cult is like being in a relationship with a narcissist. It's exactly the same top notes. So as we undo it, then I will take their cult and I'll say, it did this, this, and this. How did you know that, doctor? I'm like, well, because it's exactly what a narcissist does. So, and sometimes it's yoga gurus. The minute you call yourself a guru, and I say this as an Indian woman, you're already in murky waters. Like, no, don't call yourself a guru. Like, you know, so it's so it's just even the terming, and it's I also think that one of the biggest issues we've seen is the forced positivity of the world. You've got to be optimistic. You need to think positive. I will never forget when a friend of mine who was surrounded by other narcissists got diagnosed with stage 3 cancer, and the prognosis was grim. Indian woman as well, and she pulls me aside. She just had her radical mastectomy, so she's got no breasts, no hair. I mean, she's terrified, and she said, if one more of these bitches comes up to me and tells me to be fucking positive about my cancer, I'm gonna hit them. I said, I'll help you, you're weak. Together we will hit them. You know, and it's that be positive. It's a form of mental control, right? So as though the guru can dictate that for others, rather than being empathic and literally meeting a person where they're at. Grief takes time. Trauma takes time to process. Hurt needs to be processed on an individual's time, and saying, be happy because I'm telling you to be happy. It's completely unempathic, but yet here we are.
So let me ask you to define narcissism, and let's make some distinctions between sociopaths, psychopaths, because I think that'll help with the foundation here.
So I think the key here, number one, what is narcissism? It's a lack of empathy, entitlement, grandiosity, arrogance, inability to manage any kind of disappointment, and that tends to be manifested as rage, chronic validation seeking, but all of this, and envy of other people, but all of this, the core of it, and this is what gets forgotten, is that it's all based on a deep, deep insecurity. Everyone looks at the narcissist, they say they're charming, they're confident, they're successful, they're smart. That doesn't mean if you're those things you're narcissistic. But if it's built on that core insecurity, that's why the person needs to be grandiose and entitled. Because if I was that fragile inside, my temptation would be to protect it. It's like if you broke your arm, what do? We put a cast on it. Why? So the arm doesn't get broken again, or the bone doesn't get agitated or moved. When you have a broken inside, you're that insecure, you're going to protect it. How do you protect it? I'm the shit. I'm the best. No one's better than me. Why should I have to wait in this line? I'm the best after all. Everybody move out of my way so I can be the first in line. Why am I not the VIP? All of that's protective. All of that is them putting this carapace around this fragile interior. So anything from the outside that cracks it, marital breakup, somebody else beating them at what they do, getting more sales, having more money, having a bigger yacht, having a better whatever, that is going to piss them off. And that's where you see the rage and the acting out. That's narcissism, okay? There's different kinds of narcissism. There's grandiose narcissism, which is sort of textbook, come to my palace and be palace-y with me, and I'm so great, and you're so lucky to be my friend, and I'm so beautiful. That's what we classically think of narcissism. But then there's the malignant narcissist, and that is somebody who's downright dangerous. They're malevolent, they're exploitative, they're manipulative. They smell like a psychopath, but you're going to learn in a minute why a malignant narcissist isn't a psychopath. They're slightly different creatures. There are the more vexing, covert narcissists. These are people who don't look like narcissists. They look like victims. The world was never fair to me. I never got a fair shake. You know what? Maybe he succeeded because he got more money to start with than me. I would have been better than him if my dad gave me money up front. You know what? I'm too good to show up to a job. Why should I do that? Like, I got all these ideas. I'm the next Steve Jobs. Like, let the world find me. That's covert narcissism. They look so hangdog and so sad all the time that people often think they're depressed. And they come to a therapist's office who thinks they're depressed and treats them for depression for 3 months and then wonder why they're not getting anywhere. And this person, well, the world is against me, the world is against me, the world is against me. Right. Their grandiosity is, why doesn't the world see how great I am? Versus the grandiose person who says, look how great I am. And then there's even what we call noble narcissists. These are the people who do lots of charitable work and have these big rescue the elephants, rescue the world, rescue everyone kinds of profiles, but they're doing it solely for validation.
That's the same as a communal
narcissist?
narcissist?
No, they're the same as a communal. Same as a communal or noble narcissist.
Okay.
These are the people who you think like, wow, they're saving the world, they're so charitable, they're so wonderful, but then catch them behind closed doors and they treat their partners, their families, anyone one-to-one, their staffs, absolutely horribly. So they only have empathy when they're on stage or they're saving an elephant.
I mean, I see so much of that especially in the stuff that I've done in the nonprofit world, and it's cosmetic.
It's very cosmetic, yes, but it's so the work is being done in the name of seeking validation,
right,
versus for the meaning and the purpose, or just the higher purpose, as you will, of doing the actual work. That's narcissism. I'm sure you're wondering, what's the difference between that and narcissistic personality disorder? There was a wonderful book by Alan Francis called Twilight of American Sanity. I don't know if you've read it, but it's a fantastic book. The diagnosis of narcissistic personality disorder only entered the world of psychiatry in the 1970s. This is a late entry. Freud wrote about it. Otto Rank was the first person who wrote about it. These were early, analysts and obviously theoreticians, but we didn't make it into a diagnosis till the 70s. Francis was one of the people who wrote about it.
Okay.
When Trump got elected, he wrote this book about narcissism, and he's like, Trump doesn't have narcissistic personality disorder. Why not? Because in order for something in the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manuals of Mental Illness, you have to, in order for it to be diagnosis, it either has to be causing the person subjective distress. Think about a depressed person. They're uncomfortable. They can't get out of bed. They feel sad all the time. They're angry. Or it has to be causing them social and occupational impairment. You look at somebody who's got seems to the world a fine marriage, or at least the person thinks it's a fine marriage or relationship. They seem to have perfectly fine kids. At least to the world it looks like that, and the person thinks that, and they're not having any distress. We don't get to diagnose it, which is why the majority of people with narcissistic traits don't get diagnosed, because nobody ever lays eyes on them.
Yeah.
So that's why the prevalence of narcissistic personality disorder is about 1 to 5%. I'm spitballing here because we don't have the numbers. The prevalence of narcissism in the American culture is probably closer to 30%. That gap.
So 30% of.
I would guess so. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. It's 1 in 3. But now when we go to psychopathy, we jump the rails. Narcissist, insecure. Okay. When the mask gets pulled off the narcissist, and he and I were talking about his program about, getting people ready to go to prison. One of the things he's going to run into most, and this has come up when I've taught at jails and prisons about this, to the clinicians there, is that they're so insecure, now the mask is off. Shame, you're a bad guy. I was once supposed to do, I think, an interview with Steve Madden, I was telling him, for this thing on narcissism. And he was actually willing to subject himself to talking to me. And then at the 11th hour, I think he had something more interesting to do, surprise, surprise. But he acknowledged it. He said the thing he was most frightened of was going to jail, or going to prison, and he did.
Yeah.
And so it shatters them. A psychopath is not insecure. They have no fear, they have no anxiety, and they're completely stress resistant, which is why they make, for example, great surgeons. They make great CEOs. They make anyone who needs to stay completely calm at a time of tremendous danger, right? So nothing bothers them. That's just why they make great hired assassins. I mean, anything that requires you to be calm, cool, and collected under conditions that are difficult for people to do that. They're dangerous.
I was watching a show on drug lords and gangsters and mob leaders and stuff, and they were talking about the brain scans that some of these people in fearful situations, for most people, it doesn't even register. It doesn't bother them at all. So is this a genetic thing?
Yeah, so the belief with psychopathies, it's definitely biological, and the imaging studies have shown that very clearly. There's likely, the genetic piece is still being argued, because think about it, far, far more men have been diagnosed with psychopathy than women, so we don't see, there's almost no research on female psychopaths, though we see them. An interesting speculation would be someone like Elizabeth Holmes. Is she a malignant narcissist or is she a psychopath? Like I've watched everything on her I can because you don't see women in these situations much. She's somewhat, I haven't talked to her so I don't know, right? But it's that, but the key with the psychopath is they feel no remorse. That's the issue. They feel truly no remorse. The narcissist actually does feel some remorse. For anything from even smaller time stuff like infidelity to big ticket stuff, I embezzled $20 million. So a Madoff type reaction, psychopathy. Okay, that's a great, absolutely didn't register. It's like, this is really inconvenient that you're doing this to me, but no circumspect sense of how this impacted other people.
Do they fake it as if they?
They fake it. They can fake it. They absolutely can fake it. But it really, it's like an aftermarket thing. Like about, this was about 10 hours too late. Like this should have been what you led with. Another one was that guy, Larry, God, what the hell was his? Larry Nasser. He was one of the physicians in the whole gymnastics issue of all the gymnasts who were sexually abused. I dug deep into that case because he felt so psychopathic. He never ever expressed remorse to the girls and young women he harmed. All he said is basically, this is a pain in the neck, why are you wasting so much time? You're hearing similar discourse from a gynecologist who sexually abused countless scores of girls and women over 20 years at USC. Just know you're inconveniencing me with all these proceedings. I'm like, oh my God, you've destroyed hundreds of lives. That doesn't register. A narcissist would show more guilt and shame under those conditions.
Wow. So sociopath.
Sociopath. This is a less articulated condition. A lot of people incorrectly, interchangeably use the term psychopath and sociopath. The psychopath is considered to be, again, that calm, cool, callous, calculated, smart person who's just able to barrel through in a remorseless way, and we have much more evidence that that is a central nervous system phenomenon. The sociopath is likely someone who was, and again, criminologists and everyone argue about this, that may be more of something that was created by the environment. Somebody who was beaten up a lot by a father or a caregiver, somebody who grew up on the streets or under conditions of tremendous deprivation or danger. And that under different conditions, the story could have probably gone a little bit differently. They also tend to be more combative. You'll probably see a lot more sociopaths in prison than you will psychopaths. Sociopath gets into a bar fight. A psychopath would never, diminish themselves in that way. They'll find a way to slowly destroy that person's life or kill them, and no one will ever know the difference, kind of thing.
Wow.
So whereas a sociopath, they'll fight, they'll get into a street fight, they'll get into a bar fight. They're less regulated. They tend to be less successful. The big difference that's been brought up in the literature is a psychopath at some level doesn't understand the function of rules. They're like, why is this a rule? Like, why can't, she did me wrong in a drug deal. Like, why can't I kill her? Like, please help me understand this. A sociopath knows he shouldn't kill her and still will.
Interesting.
Yeah, so there's a not knowing, but that said, even though there's a not knowing in psychopathy cannot be used as part of the insanity defense in the United States. That has been taken off the table. Yeah.
Is there any idea how many people in the United States, as example, are North America are sociopaths, psychopaths?
I would guess with psychopathy, merciful, it's probably under 2%. It's a pretty low frequency phenomenon. It's rare, it's terrifying. And interestingly, some of the professions, like I was reading some research on the top 10 professions that have psychopaths in them, and amongst those were surgeon, CEO, and clergy.
Yeah,
those are the professions that attract psychopaths.
Wow. So statistically speaking, if there's anything there, then there's 30% of this audience are narcissists then?
Maybe. Yeah, again,
Can
I
you
don't want to
point
be
to them,
mean
the ones that you just
because I love, this group has been amazing.
Yeah.
But what you might find in a group like this, because everyone is so successful, is sort of what I consider just sub-threshold narcissism. Like just enough cockiness to get you into trouble. And I would love to sit with each and every one of you and find out what your close personal relationships are like. Because it may very well be that that's where it's not working as well as it could be.
Gotcha.
And again, you may have also gotten lucky, Joe, because you're you. And you might have gotten 100% entrepreneurs where there's not a single narcissist in the room. Listen, is a little of it going to make you successful in business? Sure, because if her and I are vying for the same job and I like, oh, she's so sweet, I'm going to give her all the intel, we're in this together. I may not get the job.
Yeah.
But if girlfriend's like, yeah, she's going, she's like, I'm not telling her everything.
Right.
That's, is that narcissism? I think it's a probably heavy-handed use of the word, but that lack of empathy, I mean, that to me is what the whole thing sort of hinges on. And then when we talk about the origins of narcissism, I think people can self-reflect. But I got to tell you, so far, my alarms maybe have gone off 1.5 times today at the most.
How do I develop one of the most amazing entrepreneurial group of givers without narcissists in it? Like, how awesome would that be? Like, because I'm part of many other groups and speak at a lot of different things, and and some of them are just filled with narcissists.
Part of it is how much of your discourse is an us-them discourse. Like, we're the chosen and everyone else is a loser. I haven't heard that once today. Whereas other groups will say, you're the chosen being here, those other schmucks don't know what they're doing. So if someone else was doing what you're doing and kept saying Joe Polish is a hack, he's an ass, he's an idiot, that's probably going to generate sort of a more kind of a narcissistic kind of groove. I have not once here heard another entrepreneurship development program to be spoken about in such a bad way today. So maybe they're out there.
Yeah.
But as a newbie who's here with fresh ears, it's not like this group exists to denigrate and devalue others. I would say that kind of energy would probably cultivate that, that sort of sense. We are the chosen.
Yeah.
It's us, and nothing's better than us. So that kind of, you're not. Even though this feels incredibly exclusive, and everyone I'm meeting, I'm like, every neurotic. Where is he? Tucker is like, don't let it bother you. I'm like, oh my God, everyone here's so successful, smart, and yet it's, but everyone's humble, So but I think that might do with the curation.
What's funny too, like, I don't ever want this group to be known for me. I want it to be known for the people in the group.
Right.
I want, that sort of thing. And what I've noticed about a lot of people that lead groups is they have to be the star. They have to be this. I really just try to curate, right? Because there's people that are way smarter, way better speakers than me. I just am a curator, right? And a lot of groups, if they're not the main star there and everyone's beneath them, it just doesn't work for them. They can't function that way, and it's quite fascinating. Now, having said that, I've said this jokingly, that anyone that writes a book, anyone that's a speaker, anyone that puts themselves out there publicly has some level of low self-worth, low self-esteem, wants the world to applaud them, they want validation.
100%.
How do you know if you're a narcissist? Meaning, I'm like, how do I identify certain traits that I could, if I'm aware, can do something to better myself?
So let me ask you this. Do you have contempt for human emotion?
Meaning?
Contempt. Like, let's say she all of a sudden started, like, huh? Yeah, don't be such a whiner. Or like she starts telling us something personal and it's like, oh, come on, get over it.
I rarely say stuff like that because I'm with the work that I do in Genius Recovery, and with one of my main goals is to reduce suffering. Even with this group, it's not I haven't figured out how to market it. It's a lot easier to tell someone how to come into here and build and grow a business than it is to reduce entrepreneurial suffering. But I'd rather reduce entrepreneurial suffering, because if I can lower that, then they're going to succeed in far greater levels.
But is that a long way of saying you don't have contempt for people's emotions? Like, in other words,
that's rare. I would say don't feel that feeling or try to shut it down.
Or even just be grossed out by feelings. Like, people are like, oh my God, like there's too many people talking about their feelings. I don't want to be bothered with this.
I'd say in the past, maybe I may have had a tinge of that, but I don't think. To
me, when I say people, I get probably at least 10 emails a day from people all over the world who email me and say, shit, I've watched your videos. I think I'm a narcissist. And then they'll give me examples of it. And yeah, they're pretty spot on. Yeah. Like they probably are. And at this point, likely things have gone wrong. Likely a partner left them, they're alienated from kids, they might have lost their jobs. They've had a wake-up call.
Right.
And now they're reflecting on that. And so I think that, again, it is that awareness that you really don't have empathy, that you do have contempt for other people's feelings, and that people who really do believe they deserve special treatment for no other reason than because they're them.
Right.
They're too good to wait in a line. And